Nighttime is beautiful, but some nights leave scars that never fully heal. Today we're covering Reddit's most disturbing stories, and some people still can't shake them. Let's dive into our first story. My dad told me never to go outside that night, not even into our fields. Now I regret it. I don't talk about this much. My wife knows the short version. My buddies from high school know there's a version of this story, but I've never actually told it start to finish, not even to my dad, and he was there for the worst part of it. I grew up on a corn and soybean farm about 40 minutes outside Cedar Falls, Iowa, on a stretch of county road that doesn't even show up right on GPS half the time. Our closest neighbor, the Hendricksons, was almost 3 miles down the road. My mom died of cancer when I was 12, so from then on, it was just me and my dad in that farmhouse. He worked the fields, I went to school, and in the fall, I rode my bike to football practice because he was usually out working until dark and couldn't drive me. I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand that being alone outside at night wasn't unusual for me. I did it all the time. I biked 2 miles home from practice in the pitch dark more times than I can count. It never bothered me. My dad never once told me not to. Until that one night in September of my sophomore year. I remember it was late September because we just finished the second cutting on the hay and the beans were still green, not ready for harvest yet. I got home from practice around 8, put my bike in the shed like always, and when I walked in the house, my dad was standing in the kitchen instead of sitting at the table like usual. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there. He said, "Don't go outside tonight, not even to the shed, not even for your bike. I mean it." I asked him why. He just said, "Just don't." His voice wasn't angry, it was flat in a way I'd never heard from him. My dad was not a nervous guy. He'd worked that land his whole life, dealt with coyotes getting into the chicken coop, dealt with tornado warnings, dealt with burying his own wife. Nothing rattled him. So when he told me that and wouldn't explain it, it stuck with me more than if he'd yelled. I didn't push it. I ate dinner, did some homework, and around 11 I couldn't sleep, so I got up for a glass of water. My room faced the back of the house toward the fields. We had 4 sodium floodlights on poles out there, the kind that buzz a little and throw this orange-yellow light in patches. My dad kept them on at night because we'd been having trouble with deer, and that summer, something that had been getting into the grain bins that he never did identify. I looked out my window like I always did, not thinking about anything, and that's when I saw someone standing in the field. It was maybe 400 yards out, past the second light pole, in one of those gaps where the light barely reached. Most of the bean field was just black. But there was this one patch lit orange from the pole, and there was a person standing dead center in it, not moving. I want to be clear about something. From that distance, at night, under sodium light, you can't see color right. Sodium lights wash everything into this orange-brown, but this person looked wrong, even accounting for that. The color on them wasn't just orange from the light. It was darker in patches, almost rust-colored, like something had dried on their skin or their clothes. I remember thinking it looked like they'd been out in the mud, or maybe it was just work coveralls stained up from field work, which honestly wouldn't have been that strange around here. I watched for probably a full minute, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe Hendrickson's boy messing around, maybe some hunter who'd wandered onto our land, which happened sometimes even though we didn't allow it. Then the figure lifted one arm, slow, and waved me toward it. Not a big wave, just one motion, arm up, hand open, and then it went still again. It didn't call out. It didn't move any closer to the light. It just stood there after that, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. I know how this sounds. I know the smart thing was to wake my dad up right then. But I was 15, and I told myself it might be somebody who actually needed help. Maybe somebody's car broke down on the county road. I didn't let myself think too hard about the alternative. I put on my shoes and went out the back door quiet, not through the front where my dad might hear the screen door. The night was warm still, that late September. Iowa warm where the air feels thick even after dark. I could hear crickets and somewhere off toward the Hendricksons, a dog barking at something, on and off. My legs felt fine walking the first 100 yards or so, right up until I got past our old grain bin and the ground dipped down into the field proper. And then I started sweating in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The bean rows are only about knee-high that time of year, so I could see over them fine, but once I got in among them, the sound changed completely. Up by the house, the wind moving through beans just sounds like wind. Once you're inside it, walking through it, every gust sounds like something is moving through the rows near you, and not always in the direction the wind is actually blowing. I kept stopping because I'd hear a rustle off to my left, and then a second later, one off to my right, closer than it should have been able to get that fast. I told myself it was rabbits. We had plenty of rabbits in that field. I still tell myself that. I lost sight of the figure for a stretch because I dropped into a low part of the field, and when I came back up, I couldn't find the patch of light I'd been walking toward. Everything looked the same in every direction, 4 floodlights all throwing the same orange glow onto different empty rows. And for a second, I genuinely didn't know which way the house was behind me. I kept walking anyway. I don't know why. My legs just carried me forward like they'd already decided something my head hadn't agreed to yet. And then, without me really understanding how, I was standing right where the figure had been. There was nobody there. Just an empty patch of bean rows and one of those strange circular flattened spots in the dirt, like the plants had been pressed down and stayed that way. The hair-thin stalks around the edge of it were bent and snapped in a way that didn't look like wind damage or deer damage. It looked broken by hand, almost deliberate, like something had pushed the stalks down one at a time instead of trampling through. My eyes started to go strange on me right about then. Not blurry like I was going to cry, more like the edges of everything got soft, the way things look right before you fall asleep sitting up. I remember thinking that was wrong, that I should be more scared than I was, and not being able to make myself feel it the way I should have. That's when a hand landed on my shoulder from behind, like it was trying to pull me backward. I spun around fast and my dad was standing right there. The second I saw his flashlight beam swing across my face, it was like something let go of me. I came back to myself all at once, the way you do when you wake up out of a dream you didn't know you were having. He didn't yell. He grabbed my hand and held it so tight it actually hurt. And I remember that more than almost anything else from that night. Because my dad had never grabbed me like that. Not once in my life. Not even when I was little and about to run into the road. He didn't say much. Just told me, quiet, that he'd told me not to come out here. I looked back toward that flattened circle before he pulled me away. There was a stone sitting right in the middle of it, wedged down between the broken stalks. It was smooth, almost polished, like something you'd find in a riverbed, except we don't have a river anywhere near that field, never have. It was dark red, and the red wasn't just on the stone. It looked like it had bled out a little around the edges into the dirt, like the color belonged to more than just the rock itself. I bent down without really thinking about it, reaching for the stone, and my dad yanked my hand back so hard I nearly lost my footing. He didn't explain. He just started walking straight toward the house, fast, not looking left or right, not looking behind us even once. I kept feeling like something was moving along behind us in the dark, staying just far enough back that I couldn't be sure. And I think my dad felt it too because he didn't slow down until we were through the back door, and he'd thrown the deadbolt. Once we were inside, I asked him what that was. He told me again, in that same heavy voice that he'd said not to go out there. He wasn't angry. I could hear something else in it, something closer to fear, like he was more scared of what almost happened to me than he was of whatever was actually out there. I asked him 2 or 3 more times over the next few days. He never gave me a real answer. That night, neither of us slept. I know because I could hear him in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. and again at 4. I'd never heard him up like that, not even the week my mom died. The next morning, walking to catch the bus, I ran into Mr. Hendrickson at the end of our driveway. He didn't waste time on hello. He just asked me straight out why there'd been screaming coming from our place the night before. I told him it was probably an animal. I could see in his face he didn't believe that for a second, but he didn't push it either. We sold the house, the farm, everything, and we moved into town before the year was out. He's 65 now. I don't bring up that night with him anymore, because the last few times I tried, he just said he doesn't remember it clearly. I still wonder what that was, standing out there in the light. I wonder if my father saw it too, the same way I did, or if he only knew enough to be afraid of it. And I wonder, more than anything, what would have happened if I'd picked up that stone before he got to me. That farm was sold, and that field's still out there today. Our next story starts with something a lot more common, a car breaking down on a dark road. Except this driver made one decision that almost cost him everything. I left my car to get help. I should have stayed inside it. I've been sitting on this for 8 months now, and I still don't really know how to start it, so I'm just going to write it the way I remember it. I, Mac, was driving home from my buddy Ray's place a little after midnight. We'd had a couple beers, not enough to be stupid about it, and I left around 12:30 because I had work in the morning. Ray lives out past Millbrook, if that means anything to anybody. And to get back to my apartment, I had to take County Road 9 for about 11 miles before it connects back up with the state highway. It's one of those roads with no streetlights, no shoulder to speak of, just corn on one side and tree line on the other, and a yellow sign every couple miles warning you about deer. I want to say it was maybe 15-20 minutes after I turned onto 9 when my temperature gauge started climbing. I didn't think much of it at first. My car's a 09 Impala with almost 190,000 miles on it, so something's always a little off with it. But then I started smelling something sweet, almost like syrup, coming through the vents, and I knew that smell. Coolant. I'd smelled it once before when a hose blew on my old truck. By the time I found a spot wide enough to pull over, steam was coming up from under the hood, and the gauge was pegged all the way to H. I put it in a park, killed the engine, and just sat there for a second like an idiot, like maybe if I waited, it would fix itself. It was pitch dark out there, no house lights, no reflectors, nothing to go off of, so I honestly couldn't tell you exactly where on that road I'd stopped. I'd never driven it at night before that. To this day, I don't know exactly where that spot was, and if I'm being honest, I don't want to know. I've never gone back to check. I got out and popped the hood, and even in the dark with my phone flashlight, I could see the lower radiator hose had split. There was coolant all over the ground, still steaming a little. I'm not a mechanic, but I know enough to know I wasn't driving that car another inch without getting it fixed or at least topped off. And I didn't have anything with me to fix a hose on the side of the road at 1 in the morning. I checked my phone, a Samsung, no signal at all. Not even one bar. So I just stood there next to my car for a while. No traffic, not one set of headlights the whole time. Just corn moving a little in the wind and the sound of my engine ticking as it cooled down. I want to say I waited close to 20 minutes before I heard footsteps coming up the road behind me. I turned around, and there was a man walking toward me, maybe in his 50s, wearing a flannel jacket and jeans. Nothing unusual about him at all. He had his hands in his pockets, and he wasn't walking fast or slow, just normal, like a guy out for a walk. I remember feeling relieved more than anything else, because at that point, another human being felt like the safest thing in the world. "Car trouble?" he asked before he even got all the way up to me. I told him about the hose, and he nodded like he already knew, like it was something he'd heard 100 times. "Yeah, that's not something you're fixing out here tonight," he said. "You're not going to get a signal for miles either. There's no sense standing out here till sunup. I'm just up that way. You're welcome to wait it out at my place and figure your car out in the morning." I told him I appreciated it, but I didn't want to put anybody out, and he just kind of shrugged and said it was no trouble, that he'd probably feel bad leaving me out there anyway. I stood there weighing it for a second. I know how that sounds now, going off into the woods with a stranger at 1 in the morning, but at the time, it felt like the safer option. I was thinking about mountain lions, not people. I was thinking about getting hit by some drunk driver coming around the bend at 50 miles an hour and not seeing my car until it was too late. A house with a stranger who seemed decent enough felt like better odds than standing in the dark by myself till 6 a.m. So I said all right, and I locked up my car, and we started walking. I figured we'd just be walking up the road, but after maybe a quarter mile, he stepped off onto what I guess you'd call a trail. Right at a gap in the tree line, I never would have noticed if he hadn't just walked straight into it. It was barely wide enough for one person. I asked him if he wanted me to light the way with my phone, and he just said, "I know every step of this," without really turning around. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say, but I didn't dwell on it. I figured he just walked it 1,000 times, lived out here his whole life, whatever. People say things like that. I turned my flashlight on anyway because I sure didn't know the trail, and we started walking. It got quiet fast. Like, really quiet. No bugs, no wind moving through the leaves, nothing. The only sound I could hear consistently was my own shoes hitting loose gravel and rock on the trail. This crunching, shifting sound every single step. We walked for a long time. I checked my phone once, more out of habit than anything since I had no signal anyway, and saw we'd been walking about 35 minutes. I remember thinking his house better be close because my legs were getting tired and my ankle had already rolled slightly twice on loose rock. Somewhere around then, I started feeling like something was wrong, and I couldn't have told you what. Nothing had happened. The guy hadn't said or done anything. I just felt it building in my chest, that feeling you get when you walk into a room and something's off before you even know why. At one point, my flashlight passed over something just off the trail in the brush, and it took me a second to register it was a backpack. Just laying there, half covered in leaves, looked like it had been there a while. I almost said something, almost asked if that was his or if he knew whose it was, but I didn't. I don't know why. I just kept walking and didn't say anything. And he didn't say anything either, like maybe he hadn't even noticed it, or like he had and didn't care. Then he started talking again, out of nowhere. Asked me if I believed in any of the local stories, said there'd always been talk about people going missing out around these hills, disappearing off trails like this one. Said his grandfather used to tell him stories that would curl your hair. Asked me straight out what I thought was really out here. I don't know exactly why, but that question scared me more than anything that had happened so far. I'd already started praying in my head after seeing that backpack, just kind of automatically, and I guess it just came out of me, because I said, I believe Jesus Christ watches over me and protects me. Whatever's out here, I'm not worried about it. I didn't plan on saying that, it just came out. He didn't answer right away. Then he just said, That's it, just And after that, the quiet felt different, heavier somehow. I can't explain it better than that. We kept walking, and that's when I noticed my feet were killing me. The rocks on that trail were sharp in places. I could feel every one of them right through my shoes. My ankles were sore. I was breathing hard just from the walk. But somewhere in there, I noticed I hadn't really been hearing his footsteps the same way I was hearing mine. Mine were this constant crunch, shift, crunch the whole time. His didn't sound like that. Or maybe they did and I just wasn't paying attention. I honestly don't know anymore. It almost seemed like his feet weren't landing the same way mine were. Like there wasn't any weight behind his steps, but I could be remembering that wrong. I've gone back and forth on it 100 times since. I told myself I was tired, that my mind was playing tricks after a long night and a couple beers. But once that thought was in my head, I couldn't shake it, and my heart started pounding, and I just kept saying Jesus' name over and over without really deciding to. He was walking slower now. I remember that much. He'd kept a pretty steady pace this whole time, and now he wasn't. Like he was hanging back, letting me get a step or two ahead of him without meaning to. I was scared to even lift the flashlight up at that point. Some part of me didn't want to see anything more than I already had. But I made myself do it anyway. I don't really know why. I just raised my arm and pointed the light up toward his face. I don't think I even stood there a full second after that. As soon as the light hit his face, I was already turning to run. Both my hands hit the ground hard along the way. I want to say I went down almost right as I turned, and they felt small somehow, numb. But I didn't feel any actual pain from it. Not right then. I got back up and I ran with everything I had. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life, and I don't think I ever will again. I had my hands out in front of my face the whole time so the branches wouldn't tear me up too bad, but I didn't put them there on purpose. They just came up on their own. I had no control over any of it. I didn't look back. Not once the whole way. I heard something behind me. I want to say twice, maybe 3 times, some kind of low sound, and I genuinely can't tell you if it was an animal or a person or neither. It just didn't sound right, and I wasn't about to turn around and find out. Then I saw headlights up ahead, just sitting there on the road, not moving. I didn't slow down. I couldn't have if I tried. I ran straight at that truck full speed, and I hit the side of it, just slammed right into the front quarter panel, because that was the only way I was stopping at that point. My legs weren't listening to me anymore. There were 3 guys already standing around it. Young guys, maybe early 20s. Nobody introduced themselves. Nobody asked my name. None of that. One of them just grabbed my arm to keep me from going down and kept saying something like, hey, what's going on? What happened? And I couldn't get a single word out. I just kept pointing back toward the tree line, breathing so hard I thought I was going to throw up. One of them went and pulled a bat out from behind the seat of the truck. The other 2 just stood there with me, and we all watched that trail for what felt like forever. Nobody came out of those woods. Not while we stood there. Not that whole time. Once I could finally breathe enough to talk, I got in the truck with them because honestly, I wasn't in any shape to stand up on my own for very long, let alone walk anywhere. One of the guys hooked a tow strap up between their truck and my car and drove my car behind us while the other 2 stayed in the truck with me. On the way to the gas station, I told them everything, start to finish. The hose blowing, the guy walking up out of nowhere, going off onto that trail with him, all of it. I don't think I skipped a single part. I just needed to get it out of me and say it to somebody who was actually there. I know all of you probably want to know what I actually saw. I get asked that more than anything else when I tell this story, so I'll just say it here too. I honestly only had less than a second to look at him. His body was still facing forward, still moving down the trail same as it had been the whole time, but somehow his head was turned back toward me, like he'd twisted just enough to look over his shoulder without actually turning around. The one thing I can say for sure, the one thing I keep coming back to, is that there was this one long diagonal line running across his face, and it didn't look like a normal scar or an injury. It looked more like something that had been sewn or stitched together with thick thread. I'm confident about that much. But that's really all I've got because I wasn't standing there studying him. My body was already moving before my brain caught up with what I'd seen. I wasn't thinking about it in the moment at all. I just ran. Once I calmed down enough in the truck, the guys told me they'd actually noticed my car sitting there on the side of the road a few minutes before I came running out of the trees. They said they pulled over just to check it wasn't somebody wrecked or hurt somewhere close by, waited around a bit when nobody turned up, and had pretty much decided to give it a couple more minutes before heading out. They were seriously about to leave when I came flying out of those woods and slammed into the side of their truck. I don't think I've ever properly thanked those guys for that. There aren't a whole lot of people who'd sit on the side of a dark county road at 1 a.m. checking on a car that isn't theirs for somebody they don't even know. I wish I'd gotten their names, honestly. But at the time, I could barely get a full sentence out. They towed my car the rest of the way to the gas station up on the highway, and that's where I called my brother to come get me. It's been about 8 months now. I still don't know what I saw out there. But one thing hasn't changed. If I'd made it out to that road even 30 seconds later, those guys would have already been gone. And I really don't like thinking about what would have happened if they had. He never went back to check what was on that trail. But not every encounter happens miles from home. Sometimes it comes right up to your window. This last one happened to a couple who thought they'd found the perfect quiet place to live. My fiancée stopped sleeping after we moved into our house in the Appalachian Mountains. I wish I had listened to her. My name is Alex, and I've lived in the Appalachian Mountains my entire life. If you grow up here, you learn the difference between being scared and being cautious. I've heard coyotes that sounded like screaming women, foxes that could make your blood run cold, and black bears wandering through yards in the middle of the night. There's almost always a reasonable explanation. About 3 months ago, my fiancé and I bought a small house deep in the mountains. The nearest town is about 20 minutes away, and our closest neighbor is over a mile down the road. We wanted the quiet. We wanted to be left alone. For the first week, everything was perfect. Then she stopped sleeping. Every morning, she'd tell me she'd heard something walking around the house. Not random noises, slow footsteps that circled the porch and stopped outside our bedroom window. I'd tell her it was deer or a bear. She always shook her head. "They're footsteps," she'd say. "2 legs." I laughed it off. I'd spent my whole life in these woods. I figured she just wasn't used to how loud the mountains could be at night. For almost 2 weeks, the same conversation happened every morning. She'd look exhausted. I'd tell her it was wildlife. Eventually, she stopped arguing with me. Then one night, I woke up on my own. She was already sitting upright in bed, staring at the window. Without looking at me, she whispered, "Do you hear it?" At first, nothing. Then, crunch. Crunch. Slow footsteps outside, not pacing, walking with purpose. I listened, waiting to hear 4 feet moving through leaves like a deer or bear. Instead, the sound stopped directly beneath our bedroom window. Then came something that still makes me uncomfortable to think about. Whispering. I couldn't make out words. It sounded like several people quietly talking over each other, just low enough that my brain kept trying to understand what they were saying. It wasn't coming from the woods, it sounded like it was right outside the glass. My fiancée grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. "I told you!" I got out of bed, unlocked my gun safe, and grabbed my hunting rifle. I honestly expected to walk outside and find a bear standing against the house, or maybe someone messing with us. I stepped onto the porch with a flashlight in one hand and the rifle in the other. The yard was empty. I swept the light across the tree line. That's when I saw it. Standing just inside the woods, maybe 30 yards away, was something I still can't explain. It was unnaturally tall. Pale enough that the flashlight caught it immediately. Thin, almost impossibly so, with long arms hanging at its sides. It wasn't hiding behind a tree, it was standing completely still. Looking at me. I don't remember seeing eyes. I don't remember seeing a mouth. I just remember it was looking directly at me. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then it leaned forward slightly, not like it was getting ready to run, more like it was curious. I fired. The rifle echoed through the valley. The thing turned and disappeared into the trees faster than anything I've ever seen. It didn't crash through the brush or snap branches. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. The sheriff came out the next morning. He searched the property, checked the woods, and eventually told me it was probably a bear or someone trespassing. There were no tracks, no blood, no signs that anything had been there at all. My family doesn't believe us. Most of our friends don't either. The truth is, some days, I don't know what to believe. Maybe my fiance's lack of sleep got into my head. Maybe I saw something ordinary and my brain turned it into something else. We moved out 11 days later. For months afterward, neither of us talked about it. That's all for tonight. Some people never find out what really happened, and maybe they never will. If you enjoy realistic horror stories like these, subscribe and join us every week.